Welcome to Citizen University TV. I'm Eric Liu. On this show, we've looked at a variety of ways that you as citizens can become more powerful in everyday life. Well, today's strategy combines art and activism. And in a way, it's pretty simple. We call it performing power. When you act powerful, you become more powerful. When you perform power, you generate it. When you deploy the power of theater, you change the theater of power. This plays out in three different ways in everyday life. First of all, it's about really understanding how to strike stances and poses of power. Secondly, it's about creating art that itself generates power and changes the balance of power. And then finally, it's about using the imagination to convert minority presence into minority rule. So let's talk about each one of these. Power poses. Now, on an individual level, you know what I mean when I talk about power poses. It's a matter of body language. If I stand kind of shrunken away and turned away from you, I'm sending a message to you about how I feel about myself, and you're going to receive that message and respond accordingly. But if I stand this way, squarely, hands on hips, looking you straight in the eye, or if I raise my hands like this and claim the space around me, I'm sending a different message, and I create a different dynamic between us. That's a matter partly of body language, but it's a matter also of just simple human psychology. And it's true not only on the individual level, but on the collective level as well. When we in groups claim space and occupy an arena, we change the dynamics and the balance of power. So let's think about a few examples just in our community. Recently, students at Seattle University staged a 23-day sit-in on the campus there to push for a more inclusive humanities curriculum at the school. They did that with a sense of spectacle and theatricality, and as you can see here in this image, they claim that space. Well, the same was certainly true also of the activists organized by Greenpeace USA and others who were called kayaktivists, who surrounded this Shell oil drill that was parked outside of Seattle and that was headed to the Arctic. They surrounded that and they created this amazing spectacle that went globally viral to try to block that project, which indeed ultimately was blocked. And then think about what's going on right now as we speak in North Dakota, where the Standing Rock Sioux are organizing again with the spirit of theatricality and spectacle and performance in order to block the Dakota Access Pipeline. Now that's a battle that's still unfolding, but there's no question that images and presence like this and striking this pose of power is changing the dynamics on the ground. Well, that takes us then to our second dimension here, which is making art in order to create power. Now, what does that mean? So much of our work in civic life begins in the imagination, and it's about the stories we tell. And when we create stories, the way, for instance, in popular culture, the creators of Blackish or Fresh Off the Boat have completely changed the story and the sense of who is us as Americans. They've changed the storyline of what an American family is and the storyline of what it means to be included in the American narrative. And they did that through art. Now, yes, this is mass-produced commercial art, but it is still an act of creativity that becomes rapidly self-fulfilling. All around this country now, people have different notions of what it means to claim presence in American life. That kind of art making can happen also just on the community scale. So here in Seattle recently, the Black Lives Matter activist Patrisse Cullors organized a performance with the Intiman Theater called Power from the Mouths of the Oppressed, in which African Americans from throughout this community gave voice to their experiences, their frustration, their pain, and their hurt, simply dealing with a system of racial injustice, simply trying to navigate all that must be navigated in a world where white supremacy still lingers. This performance was so much more impactful, not only for those who were in the audience, but for the performers themselves, for the people who were sharing their story. So much more powerful than if you had simply read this or seen this online. There was something, again, about the way in which they claim space. You know, it's no accident that theater and democracy emerged around the same time in ancient Athens, because both of these things are about pulling the individual out of her individual private self. They're about creating shared rituals of space and experience, and they're about activating the imagination. That's what it means to make art in order to make power and to change the dynamics of power in civic life. Well, this brings us to the third dimension then, which is the idea of minority rule. Again, every change begins in the imagination. So if you are in a minority, it can be an ethnic minority, an ideological minority, whatever it might be. If you're in the minority, this work of claiming power begins with imagining the world as if you were in control. It means behaving and acting as if you already were in the majority. And this is not just a matter of wishful thinking. The reality is that even though democracies are governed by majority rule, they are moved by minority will. In every significant case of social and civic change, the majority moves to follow a minority. The minority bends the majority to its will. And this is the truth of politics all around our city and country. So think about the ways in which a small number of Native American activists and elders and young people came together to pressure the mayor and the city council of Seattle to change the name of Columbus Day. They were a tiny minority of people on an issue that seemed initially to be on the fringe of political and social concern in this city. And yet they organized, they activated, they created spectacle, they created pressure, and they managed to move this city so that now the second Monday of October is called Indigenous Peoples Day and celebrated as such in Seattle and increasingly in other cities around the United States. Think about as well the caucuses that marked the presidential election year. On the one hand, we all recognize the beauty and the power of a space like this, jammed face to face with people filling up a middle school auditorium or a space like that. And yet even spaces like this that were filled all across the state of Washington during caucus season, all these folks represented not even 10% of eligible voters. They were a true minority who managed then, by their preferences and by the fact that they showed up with a sense of spectacle and theatricality, this minority managed to change the name and the game of politics in our state. And this happened in states all across the United States. It only ever takes a tiny minority like that to show up. This work of creating a pose and a stance of power, of activating the ways in which you make art in order to make power, and then finally being able to convert minority presence into minority rule, this is all about what it means to perform power. And to get a closer look at this and how it plays out in our community, let's consider one activist, artist, and attorney named Nikita Oliver, who works with young people to unlock all three of these strategies with a program called Writers in the Schools. Let's meet Nikita and her students.